You are entering a zone where religion is banished. Talk of Jesus, theories, scripture, and the esoteric is the forefront. Can you handle it? Hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's podcast of Invisible Realms. I am the Gothic Mystic. Hope everyone's weekend is going well. Tonight I've actually been looking forward to this for a while. It's mainly about how we choose our life's path and how sometimes or many times it's contrary to what either our parents or public think that we should take whenever we decide to follow the Father instead of the public idea of what direction we are to take, and how that can and cannot, or how that will hinder us, but how it sometimes is a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. And as usual, don't forget to check out the website, www.thegothicmystic.com. If you're interested in supporting this, head over to patreon.com/thegothicmystic. Let me bring over my guest here. Wrong one. There we go. Richie, how you doing, dude?
I'm well. How are you today, Gothic Mystic?
I'm doing well. Been looking forward to this one. Whenever you had your podcast with Trusiga, there was one thing that you said that kind of caught my ear, and then as I thought on it on my end, I'm like, I can kind of see that on my end too a little bit. Is whenever you said that basically whenever you, like, your parents or family had a life choice or decision for you, but you decided to go this way instead of that way. I guess we can start with that and just kind of go from there. So, how did that look for you exactly?
Fair. Well, I really enjoyed having the opportunity to talk with Truth Seeker in that context, and I think you're talking about the trajectory that I'm on as far as where my name came from. Yeah. For sure. Just kind of weaving it all together. So, Richie ZXY is how I communicate with people on the internet. Now, a few people have asked me, is ZXY really your last name? And it's not. It's how I self-identify. So I have a feeling on your birth certificate it may or may not say Gothic Mystic, but that is you having adventures and kind of doing your thing through life. So when I was younger, I had a conversation with my parents, both of which were computer literate. And they said that if you're going to be hanging out in chat places and communicating with people on the internet that you don't know, you need to make sure that you have a difference between your digital life or your digital self and your real self. Because you can't like walk around as like Z Dragon Z 555 and like personify yourself as that. And there's actually a term called digiphrenia that refers to that sort of displacement of the mind, where you resonate or you personally identify with an online account more than with your own sort of experiences. But like I mentioned, my computer literacy started when I was young. I learned a lot as I was a kid from my parents who were computer literate, and technology was something that you wanted to understand how it worked because it was part of the future. So around the high school-ish years, I really got into backstage theater. I liked the arts and like setting up audio and lighting instruments, going up on a ladder and putting the colored gels inside of them and figuring out how the stage is plotted for speakers. So you have speakers in all the corners, and focusing on that instead of the technical expertise that I had been developing was sort of a choosing of the pathways. And I found a much deeper calling to connect with others when I was making the art and making the craft. So it was possible to do like lights and sound for a business executive meeting where they have a podium and they have like PowerPoint and it's all very formal. But those exact same skills were also used for the community theater for the senior center that was doing like their interpretation of Hairspray or something. So in that kind of context, I learned how to make art with people. And I had to realize that there was working for money, working for abundance, working for that physical understanding. And there's also working from a sense of love and compassion. And so I was brought up in a church environment, and I understand that faith is a very powerful thing, but I also began to see that there were so many different churches that there was like a thread of community love between them all. So now I do what I can, including participating in online gatherings, to resonate with the idea of what faith and belief is, and encouraging people to choose their own path. Like, life is a choose your own adventure book. You're the person who decides what page you're on.
Yeah.
So does this kind of make sense?
Yeah, I completely understand that. And I'll touch on some of the stuff later. Like, one of the first things that I remember growing up, because I think me and you were like within like a year or so of each other, because you said your birthday was just like within the last week or so, right?
Correct.
All right, so happy belated birthday on that end.
Thank you so much.
I do remember that whenever the internet was really becoming big, I wasn't unlike you. My parents were not very computer literate. It was a growing thing for both ends. Of course, I took it to a whole different level, but and things have changed with my parents as things progressed. But I do remember, especially nowadays, since it's been 10-15 years since like that boom, where there was that warning of having the internet persona versus the like person-in-person persona, how people can create something and live by that, and it's nowhere near the real person. Because I actually know people who have dealt with that personally, where they met someone online and met them in person completely different.
Right.
And that's dangerous, but at the same time, those who actually do create the online persona, but it matches up with their person in person, that's a good portion. Now let me think here. You said you work with a lot of tech, right? Like audio and video and whatnot. How did that come about?
I got a experience in lighting and sound through doing, like I said, backstage when I was in school. I learned from the school shows, they always needed a sound engineer, and then it became community theater groups, so that when local schools or little groups would want to do talent shows or presentations, they needed AV, lights and sound, which eventually evolved into projectors as well, and then computers as well. So I was able to bring that technical knowledge back in from the other side. Because if you're going to have 50 wireless microphones for 50 people all singing and dancing together, it's better to have that running through an in-home network and have IP addresses on those, rather than it is to try to keep track of them independently. But to be able to talk about these things in a measured way, so that everybody who wants to listen can, is different than, oh, I really like the ones on UHF frequency number 6782, and if you don't have that, like, people can get like sort of overwhelmed with that jargon.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it's really about your passion and your excitement. If your language is simple, that's where the grace is. It doesn't have to be anything really big and complicated. It's sincerity and wisdom are things that are usually very simple and very straightforward. So I often find myself functioning as a translator, where people sort of feel what they want to say, but they're not sure how to word it right. And
I know that
I'm one of the people who I've cultivated how to give permission to people to mess up. Like, I had enough teachers in my life to teach me how to communicate in a way that means that I can stumble on 2 or 3 words, but as long as by the end of the sentence it makes sense, I'm good. Right. So that also means I can middle forever and create like an extended middle portion of a conversation, so people can noodle because we've opened and we're talking, and eventually we're going to have to close, and that will be the end of the conversation. Whereas if you're like a salesperson, maybe you open and open, so you can like keep opening new topics. Or maybe you close and you're always getting people like try to make a deal or make the sale or commit to something. But it's a different form of storytelling. And I think that our lives are literally stories that we make. It's not that our parents write our stories for us, nor our society, nor our religion or faith. It's something internal.
Interesting. Now, is this like before you made your own path, was that like the route that your family or your P word?
Parents?
No, your friends, surrounding people, basically.
Peer groups?
Thank you, peers.
Yeah.
Was that the route that people wanted you to go, and how did you decide to go your route, and what was that route?
I'll hit the how, and I think I can make the rest make sense from there.
Cool.
The how I did it was to accept that life is art. So I accepted unconditionally that life is a form of art in process. Mm-hmm. And that allowed me to look at my friends in the computer space and my friends with technology and people who really praised the cerebral processing. I could sort of understand where they were coming from and why they were valuing what they were valuing. However, I also began to be aware of like performers or prayer-formers, people who are sort of moving in their holiness and trying to express themselves in every moment. They may not be the sharpest, like the most cerebrally inclined, but mm-hmm. they are the people who are going to go out of their way to make a difference in the world. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it ended up me being rebellious. I had to decide what I was going to put in my time. I could get X amount of dollars per hour to mix this and do this job and work this event and pull the curtain for these guys. Mm-hmm. Or I could get significantly less, but work with a group of people who I really wanted to work with. Like I've done the Toxic Avenger, the musical. So if you know about the Toxic Avenger, which is like, B-movie badness, like okay. SFX before Star Wars, and they did it horribly wrong. The synopsis is that there's like this dweeby geeky janitor guy who is cleaning, and then the bullies, like the school, the jocks, throw him in like toxic waste, and then he mutates like the Hulk, and so he becomes the Toxic Avenger, and it's like really horrible. Traumaville is the name. They made multiple movies of it, but a few years ago, someone turned it into a musical. And because of my friend groups, someone that I'm connected to, who I think very highly of, said, hey, would you be able to mix this? So I got to be the audio engineer for this like super artsy style theater performance for like 6 weeks in the basement of Seattle. And it was just wonderful to be participating in that level because there was some gunshot effects, and I got the samples from video games. Like I went to my friend's Steam folder and we went through his video game folder sound effects till we found ones that we wanted to source for the play. And that kind of expression of creativity is something I'm really excited about. So I think we all have a lot more potential than we're conditioned to think. But I think those conditions are based on our conditions, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. Now, like, whenever, as you were working on this stuff, like, how did it come about where you decided to take your own route?
I think a lot of it was seeing the results of the actions. Mm-hmm. When I was learning the trade of doing technical work, sort of learning audio visual and learning to wear all black and like make sure that the performers have their microphones on and the microphones checked, and there's like more batteries backstage in case the battery dies, and make sure that there's like lights on backstage so people can see. As I was learning that craft, I realized that sometimes I got paid a whole lot of money. Sometimes I do gigs and I just get like a huge paycheck, and I'm like, I don't know why this happened. But I also realized those were the ones that required a lot more heart. Maybe it was a bunch of CEOs or a bunch of business people who were very like, tut, 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 tut. So I had to like mind my P's and Q's, and I had to make sure that everything was spick and span. So I also was usually working with other high schoolers, and for a while I was teaching high schoolers. So I had a crew of younglings under me, and we all had to like, now we're in professional mode, guys. Now we got to keep the ball rolling. Whereas if it's the local elementary school doing Little Mermaid Junior, that's not necessarily going to pay the same amount. But at the end of the run of that show, I'm going to be able to be like, the show's done, and let it go. Rather than being like, I worked for Microsoft for 6 weeks, and now I'm thinking about all the stuff that they're doing because I wasn't disengaged. Sort of a matter of working for the work's sake or working for the health. I'd say also separating belief from faith.
Interesting. Now, I can't remember exactly how you explained it, like, because you have a specific, and this is actually what drew you to me, like, you do the, what color is your day? And I'm like, like, can you explain how you got to that, like, to that thought process, to that mindset, like, type thing?
Sure, but first I want to run it first just so that we got some good foundation. But if you could describe your today in a color, what color would today be?
Probably a mix of blue and purple.
Way nice, for sure. High frequency. I dig it. And if you could choose what color tomorrow would be, what color would you prefer tomorrow to be?
Green.
Nice. Knew it instantly. Way cool. All right, so in the spectrum of light, blue and purple are near the higher ends of what we can see. Ultraviolet would be like at the highest. and then green would be near the center because the low end would be reds, and then like infrared would be like the lowest that we can see. So there's no right or wrong. I'm not assigning meaning, saying this color means this or this color means that. It's a thought experiment question that I found is unusual in our language.
Yes, I highly agree.
Nice, for sure. It sort of, I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase it. It emerged because I studied a lot about linguistics. I spent a small time in Japan when I was over my 16th birthday, so 15 turning 16. I was a youth ambassador in Japan, so I got kind of an exchange student, but instead of going to school, I had to give speeches. So I was able to like present my Japanese. And through learning linguistics, I learned that there's words in other languages that we don't have in English.
Yeah, I would expect so.
Right. Well, I also learned that there's syntax in other languages that we don't have in English. And so it took me a moment to be like, wait, there's grammatical rules and like programming of communication that we don't have access to in our language simply by how it's designed. And that's true. If someone were to like type everything I'm saying, they would have a really weird time. Like, is this a semicolon or is this the comma? Or like, how do these sentences keep making sense even though they sound like they're total run-ons? And that's part of taking the time to learn the language as close as I could, like reading it with a fine-tooth comb until I learned to speak in a way that was at least pseudo acceptable. So the development of the question was, how can I make friends? It was less, how can I break the ice? Because I could break the ice with anybody, but sometimes that's some jagged edges.
Yeah.
It's how do I make friends? And I realized the best way to make friends is to empower people. And so I've only messed up the question like twice. There's 2 instances where I asked what color is your day and I did it wrong. And boy, did I learn about it. Oh my goodness. So I'll break down either example so you can kind of catch and see, but it's pretty wild. The simpler one. The simpler one is that I was meeting a group of people and I kind of already knew sort of who they were. Like I hadn't been introduced to everybody who I was familiar. There's like 2 or 3 people here and then 2 or 3 people there. So I asked somebody, it's like, hey, what color is your day? And they said, I think like oak brown or something. Like they had a very specific one. I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I conversed with them. And then later I had met their significant other. And I forgot to ask their significant other the qualifying question of what color is your day? Because then I said, if you could describe your today in a texture, what would it be? And the person reached for the submodality of texture instead of the submodality of vision and realized that that was a really like personal question. So it was like, wait, who are you? And I was like, oh, snap. Like I didn't give myself time to actually connect with that person separately. I was just so excited about all the people that it caused me to sort of mess up the delivery.
Yeah. It's so, like, I kind of see like how you messed up. He's like the color day thing is like the introduction type thing of this is who I am, and then the next question it goes a little bit deeper, but you missed the first portion, so they're like, who the heck are you? Like, crap, wrong person. Or
for sure.
You know what I mean?
Right. I didn't allow things to happen naturally.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's finding the way people communicate. Because some people are visual and some people are auditory and some people are experiential. They got to go through it. So the other time I mucked up the question is that I caught a youngling off guard. I asked one of my friend's kids, like, when they weren't ready. They just weren't ready. They hadn't like had their breakfast yet. So they were still like processing the day.
Yeah.
I said, if you could describe your today in a color, what would it be? And they're like, like they froze and they looked like there was a right answer. Yeah, they were like, there's a right answer. I don't know the right answer. And I saw this little kid go and just panic in their mind for a moment. Oh man, what have I done? This is horrible. And my friend sort of comes around. He's got like a cup of juice and he's like, well, yeah. So if you could describe your today in a color, sort of reframing it again. And the youngling turns and sees the cup that's red and like, red, just like blurts that color out. And we're like, all right, wow, that's cool. And the look is like, red's the right color. Oh, I got the right answer. And I was just like, for the rest of the day, I was like, oh my goodness, like super patient, like everything, like measuring my words, trying to make sure I don't throw anybody for a loop.
Yeah.
That's one of the responsibilities of communicating. If you want to really communicate with people, you're taking calculated risks. But if you just want to, stay in the shallow end, not really have conversations, usually it's pretty safe. But you're probably not going to get a lot out of that conversation because you're not investing very much sort of in it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I guess whenever I think of that, whenever I've been over the last like few weeks or whatever, and I would think about you, that the way you do that automatically comes to mind. And my thought process is always like, how I think my thought process goes almost to that little kid's. Is like, I know there's no wrong answer, but it's like, how does that
I'll tell you. I know exactly what you're... So okay. It's prelingual. You're communicating something that doesn't have words yet. And so I enjoy wordsmithing to make new words so we can talk about this stuff.
Yeah, there are times whenever I have a hard time articulating, whenever I have the understanding subconsciously and I'm trying to bring it forward. And that's hard.
In my mind, whenever that happens, like loosen a little bit and add more sheep to the yard. Just like back up and then have more words. Try to explain it softly a few ways rather than sharpening and saying it's going to be this way. Because the qualifier, and this may throw you for a loop, but the qualifier for that whole is the first word. The first word is if. If you could describe your today in a color, what would it be? Because if your brain says no, you're going to say, I can't, and it's done.
It makes sense. That makes sense.
Right, but that permission of if you had the ability, what would you do with this?
Yeah.
And a lot of people feel empowered because like, whoa, I can freely choose. Some people get kind of hung up and like, well, wait, what does it mean if I say blue? You know what I mean? They're judging themselves before it comes out. But I learned that particular pattern of opening the infinite basically after having a lot of communications with people about religion. Because I talked with a lot of people who said, it's this holy book, or it's this holy book, or it's this holy name, or it's that holy name, or it's this icon, or that prayer, or this thing. I learned eventually that it became less important about what and more important about why. Because people choose to believe because of something.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't matter what they're believing in so much as they're choosing to have the belief circuit firing. So I like to encourage people to believe in themselves. And it used to be like, if aliens came down, what's the first movie you would show them?
Wow.
Or it'd be, if you could have an unlimited amount of any one kind of food, what kind of food would it be?
Yeah.
Right. It's just a lot of if questions until I stumbled accidentally on the, if you could do this thing, what would it be? And all of a sudden, like a key, it turned, and everybody I talk to, with a few exceptions, finds it to be an inspiring and exciting question that they can ask others. And the people who are sketched about it, I usually find that they're sketched about a lot of things. So I learned to sketch with them, and we can keep things very vague and light and bright, and they don't have to commit to any color of the day, because that's fine. Everybody's in their own space, and some of us are more transparent than others.
Yeah, so like whenever I think about this, whatever, the way my brain thinks, and how the Lord has changed it to think more of a symbolic sense or a metaphorical sense. Whenever I think of like what color, I'm like, okay, and I say it like, okay, and to me it's like, okay, what is this color symbolic of, and how does that apply to the day itself?
Okay, for sure. See, in my mind, I'm doing my best to kind of see things as they are and then let them be. And it sounds like you're seeing things as they are and then bringing that experience in. Because there's a lot to be said for that. But I think the most powerful things I learned in my life were really simple, and I remembered them rather than learning them. So it's the kind of questions and the kind of interactions where you participate in reality with somebody and you either like who you are with them or you don't really like who you are with them. And in my mind, that's sort of choosing your own destiny, in the sense that I'm going to choose to invest my energetic time and attention into these people and not into those people. So like I mentioned before, I've done a lot of AV stuff, spent some time, not too much in broadcasting. I don't prefer like the studio kind of setup. I would rather the stage, like Broadway versus Hollywood. That's my choice every time. But there are a lot of people in the broadcasting space that have mastered like this I'm not going to do it because I hate it. This shout talk. They talk like shout, so it's urgent and you have to listen to them. And like the character of their voice is something that your body, like as a creature, wants to hear, but then like the words they say aren't always things that are mentally engaging. So
it kind of seems like they would have that thought process because they're so used to having to yell across the building or project just to get that, and it's become like a cemented thing. I got to do this all the time whenever they don't.
Totally, for sure. And I guess it's really exciting in my mind to see what things are cemented in our culture
Mm-hmm.
and what things are still maybe a little more malleable and flexible.
Yeah.
I know that the idea of like online community and online prayer groups,
Mm-hmm.
I've been familiar with for a while, and I've kind of dialed into that idea back when Skype was a new thing and sort of fathomed it. Like I've got really cool stories about learning to meditate through Second Life and like all that kind of stuff. But
Interesting.
yeah, it's insane when we think we know things, because as human beings, there's like infinite amounts of data that we have not processed.
Yes, absolutely.
So I really am excited by spending time digitally and physically with people thinking about things on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we consolidate our focus, like someone who I look up to a lot says, if you can mention it, you can manage it. And so that encourages me to like have the conversation about kind of tricky things, even if you don't know what the words are, because as soon as it's mentionable, it's manageable.
I can see that because you're the one that's bringing up the topic, and so then whenever you bring up the topic, you can manage the topic itself by asking certain questions and or answering certain things or changing certain subjects pertaining to that subject.
Right, and to your narrative in relationship to that topic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that was one of the learnings when I found some people on college campuses with their own little version of their Bible shouting and screaming and doing that same like rah, 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 rah. And eventually I learned that my form of rebellion was to stand there and to look at them until they wavered. And as soon as they wavered, decide if they were worth my time or not. And if they were worth my time, take a step closer. And like get up to them, be like, hello, you're yelling at all of us. Can I talk to you for a moment? Because I don't think the guy in the book tells you to yell. So in my mind, it's a lot of, we should be, and this is accelerating into church culture for a second, but we should be doing what Jesus did, not saying what he did.
Yes, absolutely.
Fair. So there's a couple different rungs of Buddhism, and the study or the doctrine of that on the third tier is do what Buddha did. It's the exact same. It's like do the enlightened thing. You don't have to study the sutras and learn the mantras and meditations. You just have to be compassionate and actively ethical in the world.
I can actually see a parallel with that in scripture, because how do I word this? Okay, so the Pharisees, were always like speaking about this stuff, but they weren't actually doing this stuff.
Right.
Interesting. I can totally see that. Okay, so shifting gears, because I'll probably come back at the Lord always finds a way to tying things up for me. You had mentioned, and this was this really intrigued me, the way you came to the ZXY. Now I understand the concept of it, but I want you to explain it, because that really intrigued me, and I'm like, and whenever you explained that on Truth Seekers podcast, I'm like, that perspective is fascinating. I can totally see it too.
The letters and the coordinates of Z, X, and Y?
Yes.
Very good. So I think I was in like a microphone class. I think it was like microphones or like recording technology when I was studying in Wyoming under my professor, who I'm still connected to and think very highly of. Got a lot of mentors, and I realized that it's important to have good mentors and good heroes. They were saying something along the lines of, well, if you don't label your tracks and then engineer X, Y, and Z has to get it, they're going to have to figure this out. And like, it wasn't the first time I'd heard people use the phrase X, Y, and Z to kind of arbitrarily indicate someone somehow.
Because that's kind of basic algebra, right?
Right, for sure. It's nomenclature. It's common terms. We use it as though it's something that we aren't really thinking about. And for some reason that day, my brain heard it and rearranged it and thought about it. And what about the X plane and the Y plane and the Z plane?
Exactly.
But what if we did them in a different order? What if we like thought depth first, and we measured how deep things are, and then we measured their planar horizontal and then planar vertical? And I sort of spun that into a metaphorical sense of when I talk to people, if you want to have surface and light topical little conversations, that's not a lot of depth. That's not a lot of Z-plane. So I'm going to be like, yep, okay, we're here now, and it's sunny outside or rainy, and we're having this basic interaction, and we're done. Because a lot of people don't want to interact more than that.
Exactly.
And other times, there are people who are like medium on the depth, where they're like trying to share a little bit of their experience, but not too much, because they also want to hear about somebody else's and not feel too vulnerable. Whereas every now and then I'll meet somebody who's like oceanic depth, and the Oceania conversation would be, well, do you know about the existence of things that we can't see? And it's like, whoa, like I would love to have that conversation.
We're going that route now.
Right, but if I'm at Qdoba and I'm getting some burrito or something, this might not be the setting where we're going to have that dive.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is people forget that there are containers where depth is good. Like if you're playing a board game or a card game, or you're on a walk, and that's one of my favorite things to do is just go on a walk.
Yeah.
Just go on a walk and move your legs, and the bipedal action, you'll naturally relax, because we as creatures were designed to walk long distances. It's okay to go deep in those things, but if you're kind of having chit chat with the barista who's making your coffee, or the gas station attendant, you can't really like go too deep there, because it's the wrong environment.
Yeah.
And linguistically, this is going to be a tricky one, so I'll see if I can put it together. When we were at school in the Western world, there was the teacher who was talking, and then we as the students. And so as the students, our peer group would be when we talked to each other all in across the table way. Like we all had equal power and equal authority, because we were all learning there together. There was like the overlord or the leader character, which would be seen as the teacher. As we as human beings emerged from public school and either go into higher education or the workforce, that teacher role is sort of replaced by boss or manager. But a lot of individuals also decide to be their own entrepreneur, so they become the teacher or the boss.
Yes.
But I find that very few people outside of the education, or academia as it's called, have peers to talk across the table. They're either talking down to people who are below them, or talking up to people who they perceive to be above them. But the true resonance of seeing others as equal children of God would mean that you're going to be present and less vulnerable, but more actively in presence. Because you can't control how people hear you. All you can control is how you communicate. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, because if you don't communicate correctly, they're not going to get the message you're trying to portray.
Absolutely.
And so if you go, if your train derails, basically, they're not going to get what you are trying to tell them, and thus you're going to get, and thus the image or the memory of you in their head is not going to be what you wanted.
Right. It'll be filled with misunderstanding.
Yes.
So it would be a buffer of trust, where if a train comes off the tracks, it's like Back to the Future 3, and it like floats, and it's like not a huge problem. But there are also less and less ways that we as human beings are conditioned to share trust with each other. I think the primary way that human beings find trust in America is through trauma. And I don't think that's very healthy.
No.
But I think it's present, and since it's present, we can account for it.
Yeah.
Because that would mean that we can create experiences that are more powerful than trauma, that are non-traumatic. We would just have to like decide to really, really, really be here now, instead of kind of be here and kind of be in the refrigerator and like kind of be on Facebook and like kind of be in Netflix and kind of be at work. There's a fragmentation that you can't do. When you're praying, you can't do it. When you're in flow or in sync or in holy presence, you cannot be fragmented, because you're accepting the multi-dimensional or the crystalline facets of your attention. And we aren't omnipotent. There's a lot of people who've got like a bunch of security cameras, and so like they can see a bunch of stuff, but they can't see everything. Yeah. And we can't hear everything, because if we could, our cochlea, our ears would like explode. So since we're naturally limited in our senses, in my mind, it's evolutionarily beneficial to believe that there is something beyond us that's worth trusting in. So I got a question for you.
Shoot.
Bang.
An old mentor of mine, my former youth pastor, who I worked under for like 3 years, always did that, and I never learned my lesson. So now that I'm no longer working under him, we're good and everything. It's like, oh, I don't have to worry about this anymore. Dang it!
Oh, hilarity. Just happy to catch you off guard, I guess. I was curious where the name Gothic Mystic came from, because you asked me about my name, so I figured I'd ask you about yours.
Let me think here. Okay, so I have always enjoyed like the darker side of things. Like even when I was younger, my parents always tried to kind of push me more towards the lighter colors, but that I would do that, but then I would kind of go back to the darker things, and then like I want to say like 18 or 19, it kind of came out a little bit more, and then like in my college years, whenever I actually had my fall from Christ, I went full Gothic basically. Well, when I say full, I mean like conservatively, because I never did the like heavy makeup, in all this stuff, like the extreme stuff that you see in today's world. But I did I hit Gothic club for a while, and the Lord pulled me back out. And when I was married, she didn't really like it, but she dealt with it a little bit, and then like near the end of that relationship, it really came out, just because whenever I was with her, I thought it was just my sinful self. I'm like, no, gotta put away this sin. But then once that came out, once the end of that relationship occurred, it really started coming out, and I was like, I'm done playing trying to play what other people want me to do. And it wasn't until I think it was Head from Korn, I saw his testimony, and that was whenever I realized that the Father didn't make him remove his piercings, if he has any. I don't remember if he has any. Remove his tattoos or remove his makeup. I'm like, why would the Lord do that to me? And that's like whenever it came on full on. And whenever the Lord really started putting on my heart to start this YouTube channel, I think it was, I want to say mid to late 2016. I don't remember exactly when it was. I fought it for months. I'm like, why would I want to do this? I was a subscriber to Truth Seeker, and like I enjoyed his stuff. Like, yeah, let him have his fun. I don't want to do that. But that nagging sensation continued until I finally gave up. And I finally gave in. I'm like, fine then. And I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, I need a name. And the Lord said, the Gothic Disciple. So, because at that time it was, we're all disciples of Christ. But of course, as the intimacy and the relationship furthers and deepens with the Father, it changed. So it was originally Gothic Disciple, and that was for a couple years. And then it wasn't until I want to say sometime last year, or just over, I think at the end of 2018 or something like that, is whenever I really started embracing my mystical side. And I realized that I was a mystic, and I just never put myself out as it. I wasn't going to do it until I kind of started feeling that the Lord wanted me to. So I went ahead and changed it to the Gothic Mystic, and that's basically where we are right now. And I don't know, it might change later on depending on how this ministry goes. It might become something much bigger than that singular name can handle. But right now, that's how it is right now, and I enjoy it. It gave me a whole different name and image than what I've had for years now. Because I think whenever my teenage years up until probably like my mid-20s, I always went by Eclipse on Xbox and World of Warcraft and League and just different gaming platforms. But with the transformation that comes with being in Christ, he changes your name sometimes. And so that's kind of what happened. And so like literally I've basically retired that name and been using this one for a while. But that's kind of how that came about, in the most simplest form that I could come up with.
Very good, for sure. I dig it. Having mentioned studying language and focusing a lot on that, I think it's interesting that the Gothic part stayed the same.
Yeah.
So the G part stayed the same, but it went from a D into an M, right? So that means you're a dungeon master by default. But I'm going to go back to the D part real quick. So the discipline, if you wanted to look at like dis or dissonance, there's a lot to be said in dis or that, however you talk about it. But the context in my mind is that a discipline roots to the word disciple.
Okay.
And you're choosing to be cut from your own cloth.
Interesting.
Because a disciple would be someone who follows the teachings of the leader or of the master or of whomever. But isn't that also implying that the teacher is a disciple of their own teachings? If you have a teacher who's not following their own teachings, are they really a teacher or are they just a speaker?
Interesting.
So I think it's very interesting as well that you chose to go from a discipleship, which is powerful and good, but in my mind that's a little more samurai, into the mystic. And in the mists of unknown, the mists of the water, the hues of learning, or the mystic flavors and vapors, also can be seen as a way for someone to evolve through discipleship. Because I don't know any mystic throughout the ages, like anyone who's ever used that title, that's like totally disconnected from reality and is disrespectful of the people around them in like a fun-loving, fancy-free way. Like, no, mysticism sort of has an implied conviction.
That's good.
There's something, I think in my mind, there's something that's serious in a way about using the term mystic as a proper noun title, but you can also go to the woods and it can be mystical in the woods, or there can be other forms of unspeakability. But that personal transformation is exciting, and it'll be fun to see what your next steps look like on your way to mustard tree from mustard seed.
I like that way. Yeah, I like the way you said that. That isn't. Yeah, and like as you were, going from the disciple and the mystic, I can totally see that, because it's almost like you're going from, like you said, like the disciple of learning, to you're still with that person, but you're just going more towards like the learning of the mysteries, and actually it's much more intimate.
I'd say in some ways you're also pioneering.
Yeah, I can see that too, because I've good.
The idea would be that mystics are often ones that are translating the esoteric or the occult sort of backwards for the layman.
Yeah.
And so there's that bridge, that medium point. And there are special, in my mind, there are very special mystics who are mystical among the mystics.
Yeah.
Like, you've got your leaders, and then if you get a group of leaders together, you're going to find that there's a leader of the leaders.
Yes.
And you got like a bunch of class clowns or jokesters, and you get a bunch of them together, and there's going to be like a jokester of the jokesters.
Yeah. Like everywhere you go, you're going to have some kind of hierarchy regardless.
Right. And in that hierarchy, you're going to find there's a leader of the jokesters.
Yeah.
And a joker of the leaders. And so by talking about things that have to do with hidden knowledge and less spoken about things, including spirituality and religion, the words are cheap. Anybody can say the words. It's less even living the practice, because anybody can say the words and follow the instructions out of a book. Like, you can follow the recipe and you can get it. But to really choose to be present in your experience means that you don't even need the book. You don't even need the guidance. You can get Holy Spirit direct, and that will give you the pathway you need. But in order to have that, you have to believe like 90 to 99%.
Yeah.
Otherwise, having a book or something is going to be like, all right, I believe in this book this much %, so that's how I believe in this, item, I believe in this relic or whatever for that much, and it has support. So in the Choose Your Own Adventure, what do you think the smallest piece of input that would make the largest impact on people's lives could be when it comes to choosing their own path?
That's a really difficult question, because to me there's always all these different facets. It's like, you have what your friends think you should do, what your parents think you should do, and then many times people base their decision on those two and not actually think what they want to do. Because like I've actually seen it with my life and also others, where like you want to make others happy, but then you're not happy. It's like, but the thing is that you've done all the stuff that everyone else wants you to do, but you have no idea what you want to do, because you've always made everyone else happy. It's like, what makes me happy? I think I'm happy, but then it's like, like with my experience, once the Father pulled you out, or pulled me out, now with, I realized that, I was either unhappy, I was sad, or I was just content. Now, right now, I'm content because I have a much better understanding of what needs to happen and what is going to happen. So I'm like, you know what, I can stay here a little bit longer, but I know what I enjoy doing. So it's like, once, and that also, it also develops into a into the, what is that word, the self-confidence, I guess, self-confidence. Sure. And also like and how much you agree, like, and trust yourself. It's like, okay, am I going to enjoy doing this, or am I going to enjoy doing this? I can make other people happy over here, but like the saying goes, you can't heal people whenever you're sick. So you got to make sure that you're healthy before you can go there, or else the sick person's potentially going to make someone else even more sick and damaged. And so it kind of goes along those lines of choosing yourself first before you can go and help others.
Absolutely.
Did I answer that question? I can't remember.
You did.
Okay.
For sure.
Because I'm like, my mind's going in all different directions. I'm like, crap. What was the original question? but yeah, that's basically where I'm at right now. It's like, I know what I enjoy, but I'm having to wait a little bit longer, and I'm like, okay, there are days when I want just out, period, but I'm content with waiting because I know what's supposed to come. I just got to be patient. And that is one thing that has taken me a long time. Well, I say a long time just because, to many people a year is a long time, but if you look at the general lifetime of a human, on average, I want to say between 70 to 90 years. Sometimes it's 80 to 100 years. 1 year is nothing. So if you know what you want to do, or at least you have an idea between two different things, and you know that, okay, I'm gonna wait a year before I try to make this move again. 1 year, it's nothing, because it's like, the Bible says, our lives is just a breath compared to eternity, or compared to the time that we have been living. So it's like, I can wait another year, because the Lord has really increased my patience over the last couple of years compared to how it was before. And those who knew me before, even before and even a little bit after the transformation I began in 2014, they can see that I have a lot more patience. And I've even had my parents say, your countenance is completely changed.
I think that's a positive observation.
Yeah.
Good. I think a lot of individuals are hesitant to accept positive observations.
And
somebody says, you did a good job. They're like, no, I didn't.
I think it also comes with a different mindset too. Because the majority of the people that I have talked to, met, and known is that, at least in with the sales or real estate or those kind of areas, those people generally tend to be positive thinkers, because they make their own income. But everyone else who is more or less stuck in the 8 to 5, they have a negative thing, and they actually dislike change. That aspect of myself has completely changed, because I enjoy change, because again, the Lord is showing me all these different things and how things change and the waves and everything, and I'm able to perceive when whether it's a significant or a very subtle change is supposed to happen, and I'm always looking forward to it because I know that something that I may be looking forward to is going to happen soon. To see like a change of season or a movement that I'm waiting for.
Right.
I don't know if you can feel it or not, but like in the Truth Seeker tribe in the chat, many times some people say that they feel like they're stuck, and I've learned that over, I want to say over a period of like 6 to 9 months, each time I feel stuck, I've realized that within a few days to a week or so, we were just at the verge of something moving or changing. And like, what was it? It was just a few days ago. Someone in chat mentioned, just feeling stuck, and like me and a couple people had actually been listening to "Stuck" by Truth Seeker and been listening to his the Colors album, and none of us even really knew it, that we were listening to the same thing. I didn't feel stuck, but then it was a couple days later, I'm like, I feel stuck. Something's going to move. Something's going to shift any day now. So that's kind of how I've learned things. And a positive mental attitude is a necessity for this too. Because if you have a negative mentality, negative attitude, the Father's not going to be able to move or help you, because you're not going to want to shift, you're not going to want to move, you're not going to want to change anything. You're going to want everything to stay the same. The thing is, we weren't created to stay the same, to not move. I know it's like not only in the Bible, but also there's a Hermetic belief, that's like the vibration thing, is that, and since our bodies is made of those, of all those tiny little atoms are constantly changing, constantly vibrating, why do we think that we're not meant to move and constantly change? I've actually had this thought for a while now, that if I'm not increasing, if I'm not learning or changing or improving myself, I feel like I'm dying. Because effectively, we are. If we are not increasing, if we are not improving, we are effectively dying. We are not meant to stay stationary.
Right. I got that message from a friend when I was in my younger years, and he said very simply, entropy always wins. And I thought about it, and I was like, entropy being decay and being death, and entropy always wins. No matter what, entropy will always win because time is involved. So you could make the biggest fortress, you could have the most amazing painting, but fast forward 5 years, 10 years, 500 years, 10,000 years. Is that thing still as awesome as you thought it was? Or is your perspective limited by your experience? See, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're basically summing up is that the power of uplifting present subtle awareness, meaning that you're here, you're intentionally having a good day rather than a day. People, how's it going? I'm having a day. How's it going? I'm having a good day. It may not be the best day, but I'm having a good day because by my word, it has become good. And it's those subtle things, those tiny choices that make the larger and more mystical appearances. Like, I know for me, if I have a glass of water or something and I just drink it, it's totally fine. But if I stop and I go and send some good waves to it, allow it to be blessed, understand that there's more to me in the world, all of a sudden it takes on a new dimension of depth.
Interesting. We have a question in the comments about diet. He said, what does he think about the relation between spirituality and nutrition?
I think that our nutrition is building us. So whatever we eat, that is what we become. And I think our spirituality, now this may be controversial in the get-go, so you gotta bear with a couple sentences in this. Our spirituality is like our politics. It's not what we say we believe, it's what we do with what we believe. So if you are a spiritual person, you can have lots of, or very limited spiritual data, but it's the choosing to commit to that choice. It's the choosing to be invested. It's choosing to have the power of belief in your corner, on your side, really living the message. So I think if you're tuned in with that, you're tuned in with what you believe and why, your nutrition becomes intuitive. I know a lot of people who will eat foods for the taste, but then not like them for the digestion. Well, there's a lot of spiritual belief systems that are fun to think about, but then on the back end, they're not really helpful. So mostly in my mind, it's about finding what your ancestors ate. Learn your family tree, find out where your genes come from, and then find the diet that they ate in a healthy way. Because your spirituality is going to make itself known through your actions no matter what. But in my mind, it's easier to choose to eat healthy food for your wellness than it is to choose to eat healthy food so that you can have more dharma or something, so that you can make it like to the next level up of spiritual enlightenment. It's the motivation factor would be from within yourself. If you build a house on sand, it's probably going to be different than if you build a house on rock. So if you're putting things in your body system that you want to stand on and you want to remember, yesterday I had this really awesome whole grain sandwich with this nitrate-free turkey or whatever, like you can really choose to stand on it for memory. You're building yourself up of things that you want. But if you'd rather not remember that you had Taco Bell for lunch because it's an unpleasant thing, that may be more akin to the sand or trying to build on the water without a good foundation, if you hear what I'm throwing.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, it's kind of like my joking about about Taco Bell or McDonald's. It's like someone says, let's get McDonald's. I'm like, do we want McDonald's or do we want food?
For sure, it's food product. It's mostly barcodes. I know I got to spend a short amount of time, a little story about spirituality and nutrition, but I got to spend a short amount of time in Northern California, in the Humboldt area, helping create a Buddhist temple. So I didn't really know too much about Buddhism besides Zen Buddhism at the time, and Zen Buddhism is a form of Buddhism popular in Japan. It's very quiet, lots of Seiza meditation, sitting quietly, and maybe a gong, bong, and that's it. So it's very quiet introspection. But the Buddhist temple that I was helping bring into being was for Tibetan Buddhism, which is a different type of practice. And Tibetan Buddhism has the do what Buddha did kind of mentality, rather than the read the sutras and like put a sandal on your head and that kind of stuff, which is fun. But I learned that when I was living in an environment where the people around me were actively engaged in their spirituality and they made making food a spiritual thing, I actually felt spiritually nourished when I ate the food. Like sometimes it was very simple, like rice and dal lentils and a couple things and a couple spices, but by eating it, like I felt on the non-measurable planes being restored and being cared for, and like, wow, whoever cooked this cooked it with love. Like I can taste the give up in it. I can taste the fact that they cared. So it may be that people need to get closer to their food. Maybe you need to be the one preparing it rather than getting it from somewhere else or getting it from someone else.
True.
When I was younger, I thought, I am going to be the sum total of everything I eat. So I would imagine my residual self-image, like I would just be like a pile of food. So I'd be like, what did I eat today? I'd be like, I'm just, a couple pancakes and some toast and like sandwich and then some like something on top, and I'd just be like a pile of food. And like, that's me. And so eventually I accidentally became vegan and learned how to do that, kind of, but ever moving forward.
Yeah, I've been meaning to actually kind of eat better. Like each time it's like either, and I don't do junk food. I mean, like actually trying to do like whole foods, or I've even considered moving towards like a vegan. But then as I was researching my blood type and like what kind of a good diet was needed for my blood type, and I realized that like a high protein is needed for that, and I'm like, I could probably find foods that that are high in protein that's not meat, but I'm like, what? It seems like the best way for me to get protein is by eating meat. I'm like, but mind you, I love steaks, so it's there's no issue. But of course, I haven't gone the route of what are some of those movements? There are some movements about the like the Israelites and going doing like the real. Can't think of the stuff. Basically, they go like no pork, no meat, no nothing like nothing like that. The real, like
halal?
I guess I can't remember exactly what it's called.
Okay, halal is Islamic, but kosher would be the Jewish kitchens.
Yeah, that's kind of more kosher type thing. You know,
Okay.
not eating specific things. You know that the 5 books of Moses said not to eat. Like.
Right.
I kind of see that more of a purification process for those, for those people who don't know how to eat correctly. And this kind of goes with, with other areas of spirituality where, if they're into certain things that, that they don't have the good intention or they just don't have the right foundation at all for, the Lord will completely move them away and have them swing completely to the right on the pendulum and do their purification process that way. And I can totally see that as with the eating and foundation that way is like, nope, you're only gonna do this to kind of set the foundation, but also set the barriers so that you can learn all the lessons that you need to learn while you're doing that. And then the Father might open things up to you, but then at the same time you might say, I'm actually content here. I have no reason to go all the way where I used to be. Or me, I can nitpick here and there, but they have a better understanding of nutrition, and they, for all we know, the Lord had needed them to learn all that stuff for something that they might be doing 10-20 years down the line.
Definitely. I think a lot of that comes to bird's eye view, eagle eye view.
Yeah. Seeing the big picture and not the smaller picture.
Right. You want to zoom out and let's see, cross into a quick touch on lenses before I talk a little bit more about diet, just to kind of close some loops. But the big picture, like sometimes I meet people who are like telescope, like the biggest of the big picture, but they're kind of like missing things that are around them.
Yes.
And then there's also people who are like binoculars, like they see the big picture sort of, but they may also like forget what's behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people who are like flat pane of glass or like straight glasses, and they're seeing things mostly clear, but they don't necessarily have the biggest of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some people who are like magnifying glass, like they're looking really small, and maybe that's how you look at the big picture. If you have a map and it's a really detailed map, you have to have the magnifying glass. Or there's people who have like the microscope, like they're looking at like the super tiny small, but you could sneak up and scare them because they don't know that you're there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if somebody in my reality says they want to look at their diet as far as how they're expressing their spirituality through what they're eating, I'm going to ask them what their intentions are. Because I've known some people who say their intentions are to be healthy, so they go plant-based, either vegetarian or vegan.
Mm.
And there's really like 2 main options here. The first one is that they're going to go vegetarian or vegan, and they're going to keep eating the same kind of food. So they're going to get a lot of Boca burgers, they're going to get vegetarian pizza, they're going to eat a lot of cheese sticks, they're still going to have a lot of processed food product rather than actual whole food.
Yeah.
And the other one would be the vegetarian or the vegan who's noticing that if I eat an apple, that's almost an entire glass of water and I get fiber. That's awesome. If I have some beans and rice, that's more complete protein that my body can synthesize than any creature could ever be, because I'm going to have to strip away the creature's DNA to be able to put my own on there. The cleansing part could be they became vegan or vegetarian to eat a bunch of vegan, vegetarian junk food to go to the hospital because they have a problem, and then the hospital helps them cleanse. Or they could 1 day a week abstain from eating red meat and then notice how their digestion feels, and then get really picky about is that from 100 miles from here? Is that far away? Because I don't want to eat anything from too far away because I don't know how old it is. I know if it's from near here, I have a reasonable control mechanism that I can implement. Mm-hmm. So we cannot be anything except what we eat.
Interesting.
It makes us, like, literally on a physical level.
Shifting gears again here.
Yeah, sure.
With the ZXY, how do you implement that into your daily life? Because I know, it has to do, you got the height, the width, and the depth. And I know you kind of touched on this earlier, but like in everyday life,
for sure, we'll go depth first.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about 2 different days real quick.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me which one is a deeper day. Okay? So there's a day where you're following your routines and you're doing your behaviors and you're having your experiences and things are as they are. And then there's another day where it's a holiday. That day would have intrinsically deeper meaning, whether it's a birthday or a holiday by the calendar, or even a traumatic experience. It could be that you got in a car wreck that day 5 years ago, and so now your brain kind of remembers that day having more depth in it. Or this is the anniversary of this thing, so your mind has a different level of depth. And for myself personally, I do my best, and I'm not always doing it to the fullest of my capacity, because I too am a human. But I'm doing my best to see every day as today. And in my mind, today is the deepest day that's available because it's all we have. But if I'm in today and I'm thinking about like next Thursday, I'm kind of not doing today justice. Or if I'm stuck in 2 weeks ago and I miss all the events of today, I wasn't really available for the depth of experience that today would bring me.
That's good.
So there's also sometimes things or people that don't want to be understood. There could be unexplicable problems with a car. There could be a neighborhood that just isn't where you want to be, or a city or town that just or prefer not to be. And if you can affect it, do it. But if you can't affect it, probably not too good to complain about it too much. Like, talk about it, sure. But if your axis, like horizontal, if you can't do anything about it, you're going to have to make peace with it somehow. So after deciding how deep a day is, it's like, what are my tasks of today? What do I need to happen? What does the world need from me to happen today? Do I have to get more water? Do I have to make sure that there's pet food? Do I need to make sure that I have laundry for clothes? Like, what needs to happen in a lateral sense? And then the vertical part would be, how much do I want to be with the activity? Because let's say I got to do laundry. So I get all my laundry together and I go to the laundromat. And then when laundry's in the laundromat, I'm like kind of doodling on my phone and not really paying attention. And then like maybe I kind of get something to eat somewhere that sells like a food product, so I order a number 4 or whatever. I can choose to not be deep because I'm doing the laundry. Or I could choose to do the laundry and then as that's happening, also have a telephone interview with somebody. I could also do these other things and maintain a higher level of performance standard of myself than anybody would ask. Like, I know when I was in school, and if I liked the teacher, I wanted to do good because they were a cool person and I wanted their praise. And if I didn't like the teacher, I really didn't care if they liked me or not because I didn't like them anyway. But I realized I don't have that buffer with myself. I have to like myself. Because if I don't, then I'm just stuck in the body of somebody who I don't like. Yeah. And in my mind, that would be throwing away or maybe focusing on the wrong part.
And I think that kind of actually goes along with, like, the liking yourself goes along with, how Jesus said, you know, love your neighbor as yourself. But if we don't like or love ourselves, how do we expect to love others?
Definitely, for sure. And I think that also kind of ties backwards into the positive power of faith. Because if you have rituals and behaviors and prayers that you do, it's like you're reaching into the other worlds and like allowing yourself to be fueled up. Because you're doing the things and you're expressing the practice and growing sincerely and genuinely. But there are other people who like reach to other people and like try to fuel up from them. And if you're fueling up from another person and that person's fueling from you, you're gonna run out.
Yeah.
There needs to be like, hey, can I act in total belief and faith, and then the infinite reservoir of joy and compassion and love can express itself. Rather than believing, no, it has to happen this way. Things have to be done in this time frame. I can't be patient.
That's good.
I don't tend to speak too much in biblical terms because I was raised in a church, so I have a lot of like scriptures sort of built into my thinking.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've learned to kind of glean some of those out, because if you speak only in verse, people look at you funny.
I get you. You're fine. Like, the focus with mine is, just to kind of show people how basically everyday life is when it comes to scripture, but at the same time kind of show them how it's also related to certain things, like certain parallels that are outside of the box of Christianity or religion or whatever you want to call it, because we're not supposed to be in that box. Everything that was created by him. So, but sadly, however long it's been, we've always just looked in that box itself, and God is outside of that box and not inside the box.
Right, and I don't know if you've seen this geometric kind of pattern, but if you have a cube, and like you open the cube's top, and then you open the sides of the cube, and then you unfurl it down, it makes a cross.
I think I've heard that before, yeah.
Right, and so in my mind, it's kind of a geometric pattern that shows that you can be in the box, you can confine yourself, you also can be infinite. And I personally have been called to a lot of bhakti studies lately. Bhakti is a kind of yoga, and it's sort of a yoga philosophy that has a lot to do with unconditional love, and I'm finding some really deep connections between the idea of Christic, or a Christ-based mystic, and that connecting to some teachings within yoga beyond language, because I'm hearing a lot of like different deities and different stories and different kinds of archetypes, but the genuine and sincere nature seems to be nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's got their own idea. More important than what your idea is how you're communicating with other people. And so in my mind, like, we're living the New Testament, for lack of a better term, because these are like the adventures of Christhood after it emerged from one body. Like, I think it's really inspiring whenever I get an opportunity to tap into Truth Seeker's School of the Mystics, to kind of throw more credit and things that way, because there's yourself that'll drop in and throw random knowledge. Truth Seeker's always doing the things that he does through the seeking of the truth. But then you've got like Adam, Starcy Bay, and a couple other people who will just like show up and share things. And it's I think it's amazing in the sense that there are no physical places on this planet where individuals choose to gather and discuss that in the same format that we're doing in a digital way. So to me, the dreams and the internet, they're all kind of connected. The faith and the technology, they're all kind of connected. And I'm really inspired by the world now. Like, don't get me wrong, July 2020, the world is crazy. Like, no kidding about it. Things are totally insane. However, I'm seeing that there is some good coming from this weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm really excited about. And equally, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, so I'm glad we finally got a chance to kind of sit down and chop things up for a minute.
Yeah, like, whenever all this stuff began, I want to say, like, what, April, like March, April-ish, whatever, I wasn't sure what to make of it, and then the Lord kind of brought back something that he had taught me, or began teaching me, I want to say July-ish of 2018, give or take. I don't remember exactly, but basically, it was timeline and seeing the big picture. And so, like, whenever these things began, I had a dream. I'm pretty sure I misinterpreted the dream, but now I'm like looking at it and I'm like, oh, that's what that meant. Okay. But and then as things continued, I'm not one to be on the front lines and speaking my mind constantly, and just yapping about what's going on. I like to step back, lean back, and watch for a little bit, and just kind of come and just see. And that's whenever the Lord kind of started showing me, because there was a time whenever I was watching all these different things, and it really used up a lot of my energy. And I felt like exhausted, I felt tired. I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? And I just said, screw it, step back. And I just, and basically like whatever. How do I say this? Whatever the Lord wanted me to see, He brought to my attention. I just was doing my own thing. I was studying my own thing, and that's whenever He started kind of introducing the big picture, and had a couple dreams here and there. I'm like, I get it now. And so I think, and like you said, I think what we're seeing is this new, I don't like the word the new normal or the phrase or whatever. It is the beginning of something new, because the Lord is trying to change something that shouldn't have been there. And since I don't know if we as a church have just not listened to Him, or if He's just said, okay, enough's enough, and he's completely changing things. And like, with all the fear that's going about right now, no one is. I've watched videos here and there, and they're saying Jesus is returning, this, and this. I'm like, and this is my opinion. Like, there's too many things that need to happen before that, and I'm not. No, and I know that some people will call me certain things of certain parables that Christ gave or whatever, but I'm looking at the big picture when it comes to this thing. And I'm like, He's trying to wake us up before either things really began or something along those lines. And that's kind of how I'm seeing it, is that He's trying to wake us up in the most dramatic fashion. But sometimes that's kind of needed in order for things to happen.
True. While you were speaking, what came to mind was when you wake up to an alarm, but you didn't remember that you were the one who set it.
Interesting.
I feel like there's their presence in the way like the Holy Father set our alarm clock overnight. And so now we're like, the heck? Like, we're trying to wake up, and like, we don't remember setting the alarm. We don't remember needing to wake up. But for some reason, here we are.
That's good. I've actually had that happen to me before. Forgetting to turn off my alarm because I didn't have to work on Friday. And I'm like, the freaking is my... Oh. Stupid thing. Going back to bed.
Fair. I'd say that during the world's changes, I've actually developed an unusual amount of optimism for individuals who are having a hard time.
Yeah.
And in this way, I think that there's like a sifting going on. We're really getting the opportunity to decide what world we want to be in. Maybe the new era could be a way to say it.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, we started 2020 with global communication. We started 2020 with instantaneous file transfer. I mean, we could basically send 3D printing plans to each other and like trade stuff. So since we're in a world of digital acceleration, like our consciousness is now moving at the speed of electricity rather than at the speed of our heartbeat, the rules have changed. Because we used to be limited by like how fast can your heart beat if you're a top performer, and like maybe you have some faster thoughts, or if like you read a lot of book or smoke a lot of pipe or whatever, maybe you have the biological assistance to fathom larger things. If you look at like Carl Jung, or a lot of teachers have different kinds of ways of expanding their mind. That's a whole other topic in itself. But we're sort of experiencing an expansion of mind that's mandatory. Everybody has to expand their mind a little bit because things are going on. And if you think this is a good thing, there's a lot of power here. And if you think this is a bad thing, congratulations, there's a lot of power here. So I guess I'm looking at how to clearly identify the word release or relinquish.
Oh, that's good.
Because I think if you're choosing your own path, you're letting go of the reins and you're letting the horses drive.
Yeah.
But that's provided that you're good to the horses, so they're not going to like go buck wild and run away from you. It also implies that like you're going somewhere that they want to go. So, good hard bake. Interesting conversation. I look forward to thought sharing more in the future. Are there any other conversation topics you want to bring through?
I'm going to throw something at you from left field.
All right, cool, ready.
So, I was just curious. I don't even remember how I even came on to the idea. I was looking at the whole thing about the yeah. Let me Google it. I can't
take your time.
Icosahedron.
Icosahedron.
Yes, that's it.
Very good.
I think it came to mind just because the ZXY thing, and I know the different dimensions and everything, and that also has to do with metaphysics.
Right.
What's your take on the icosahedron? And because I know, and some people think that it's along the lines of like multiple different dimensions and whatnot. I know it's a deep, and never know what you're gonna. I've kind of wanted to touch on this stuff, like even research it, but I've never known where to start.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're just defining terms properly. We're talking about the geometry term icosahedron?
Yes. What else is there?
Okay. That would be a polyhedron with 20 faces, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And in ancient Greek, polyhedron of icosahedron would mean 20 seats. Hedra would be seat, and icosa would be 20. So icosahedron.
Interesting.
Right, amen. I got Google too, so throwing that in there and seeing what it pops out. I think about it personally as a clicky-clacky math rock. I like taking a couple D20s or a couple 20-sided dice and throwing them together and having supported imagination sessions.
Mm-hmm.
But it could also be seen that if you take designs like Metatron's cube and you reinterpret it with a third-dimensional plane, now you have things that are resonating at that multidimensional consciousness.
Yes.
So just like 2 dimensions, like you can't really draw an icosahedron very well because you need the third plane to express it. I can't really talk with you about what God is because I need the 4th plane to express it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to substitute a new 4th plane by claiming that I don't adhere to the rules of space-time by naming myself time and space. Got it?
I think so.
Fair. I really like geometry. I really like role-playing games. As a kid, I've read hundreds of role-playing manuals just for fun. I would just learn about classes and systems, and whether it's GURPS or White Wolf or Dungeons & Dragons. Shadowrun is my favorite. Cyberpunk 2020 is another great one. There's tons of ways to imagine, but in my mind, we are reality-supported storytellers.
Yes.
So when we tell a story, reality is conspiring to support that story. And there are stories older than us. Like there's stories of our forefathers and our forefathers' forefathers. To me, the power is, and that's enough. There is power. The power is. That's God is. End of conversation. You could say anything else if you want, but really the conversation is that short. And it's the moment of trust when you see somebody you haven't met before and you look in their eyes for a moment, you're like, oh, so this mechanic is going to tow my car and there's not going to be a problem. Or you go to the restaurant and you're like, hey, can I get that with, extra gravy on the side? And they look at you and you're like, they're going to get me extra gravy and they're not going to judge me about it. Like there's a way to really have trust in self. And I think that you have to choose the path of your own leading. Like you have to choose to follow yourself. And that discipleship.
Yeah.
A lot of people who want to be a disciple to somebody, they want a guru, they want a hero, they want a teacher. However, as soon as you say the guru's within, the teacher's within, they're looking at you like you're crazy.
Yeah. And that's sadly how like a lot of the church is. They don't understand that that's what Jesus was saying when he said the kingdom of heaven is within you.
And I think that also specifically that word pattern parallels with our food. Because within us, we have the gastrointestinal processes of our digestion. And in our bowels, at the lowest part of our digestion, could be a demon named Baal that gets upset when we eat things that make it gaseous because it makes our time on the toilet feel like hell. So, like, there are interpretations that say if you eat light, vibrant food and you eat from, like, the trees and you eat from the garden of the gods and you have proper portions, like you eat a little bit and then see if your body's full. Rather than like, I bet I can eat 500 chicken wings. Like, I'm sure if somebody wants to, they can, but there's a difference between eating for nutrition and eating for sustenance. And so in my mind, like the plate is the same as the yoga mat, which is the same as the prayer shawl. They're all connected. So I don't know how somebody could be spiritual except when they're doing this.
Yeah.
Or I'm a good role model, except when I'm over here doing that. It's like, wait a minute. Either you're moving in light and you're moving as love, or you're not.
Cool. All right. Well, tell for anyone who's wanting to get a hold of you, how they get a hold of you.
Sure, no worries. The easiest way to get a hold of me is to go to rainbowcrystal.org, and you can click book a session, and you can click a 15-minute session, and we'll make an appointment, and we can just chat and hang out, either video and audio or just audio. I'm also all over the internet as Richie ZXY, but I'd recommend that you check out other episodes by Gothic Mystic, and talk more soon.
Cool. I appreciate it, dude.
Appreciate you as well. Remember to breathe.
I'll see you on School of Mystics next time you hop in.
Sounds good. Thanks again for the opportunity to chat.
Not a problem. I enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Gratitude.
Is that button? I almost forgot to say that for those who are wanting to, like he said, wanting to see, learn more of me, head over to www.thegothicmystic.com or patreon.com/thegothicmystic. Can't talk tonight. So, and also don't forget that we will have the Bible study tomorrow. So if you're interested in joining that, subscribe to YouTube, like the Facebook page, and join in. Until next time, I hope everyone has a good night.